Hello there. I'm so happy you're here with me tonight. Insomnia keeping you company? Well, now you have me too. Let's make these sleepless hours meaningful with some hushed stories, authentic experiences from real people everywhere. If you find yourself drawn to these tales, please like, comment, and subscribe so we can meet again tomorrow night. Now, let me take you away with our first story. In the warm spring of 2014 in Houston, Texas, 24-year-old Brittany Cosby and her girlfriend, 24-year-old Crystal Jackson, had been building a life together for 2 years. Their relationship was flourishing, with each supporting the other's dreams and aspirations. Friends often described them as each other's biggest cheerleaders, always encouraging one another to reach for their goals. Brittany's early life had not always been easy. Her parents had separated when she was young, and her father, James, had been absent for significant periods while serving various prison sentences. She had primarily been raised by her great-grandmother, Annie, with whom she now lived and cared for. After some uncertain years trying to find her path, Brittany's life changed completely when she met Crystal. Crystal brought stability and joy to Brittany's world. She was a security guard and had a 5-year-old daughter named Zanaya, whom Brittany adored, even though they faced judgment from some family members because of their relationship. They persevered. Crystal's father, Ivan, who was a pastor, had expressed his religious views about their relationship, and James, Brittany's father, had made his disapproval clear as well. The tension with James had intensified when he was released from prison 5 months earlier and moved into Annie's house while between jobs. Despite these challenges, Brittany and Crystal remained focused on building their future together. Brittany worked at Starbucks, and with their combined savings, a tax return, and a cosign from Annie, she had recently purchased a new SUV, a silver 2006 Kia Sorento. This vehicle represented newfound freedom for both of them. Brittany was thrilled that she no longer needed to take the bus to work and could drive Crystal to her job. She especially loved being able to take Zanaya to school and pick her up afterward. The couple dreamed of having their own place someday. Currently, Brittany lived with Annie and James, while Crystal and Zanaya divided their time between Annie's house and Crystal's parents' home. On March 3rd, proud of their new vehicle, they drove to Brittany's Aunt Ebony's house to show it off. Ebony, who was more like a sister to Brittany, felt immense pride seeing her reach this milestone. Afterward, they visited Crystal's parents to show them the SUV as well and picked up Zanaya. Crystal invited her father Ivan to come look at the car, but he declined. As they drove away, Crystal called out, "Love you, Dad. Bye," eager to share their achievement with others. On March 6, 2014, Mary, Crystal's mother, who worked at Zanaya's school, grew increasingly worried when she couldn't reach her daughter throughout the morning. Her concern deepened when Zanaya didn't arrive at school that day. At Starbucks, Brittany's manager was also worried as Brittany had missed her shift without calling in, which was unlike her. Later that evening, Mary and Ivan went to Brittany's house. They were alarmed to find Zanaya there alone, with no sign of Brittany or Crystal. They took Zanaya back to their home and spent the night calling hospitals, police stations, and everyone they knew, trying desperately to locate the missing women. The following morning, March 7th, at around 7 a.m., a delivery driver making an early morning beer delivery to the Fisherman's Cove Food Mart in Port Bolivar, Galveston County, made a chilling discovery. Behind a dumpster near an abandoned motel, he found 2 badly beaten bodies. Shocked by what he saw, he ran back to the store and asked the owner to call 911. "911, what's your emergency?" "I have 2 people at the back of my store." My Budweiser man was here to drop off an order, and he walked through to the dumpster to dispose of some trash. And he came in and told me to call 911. The bodies belonged to Brittany Cosby and Crystal Jackson. The scene indicated they had suffered violent deaths. Brittany had been struck multiple times with a sharp object, causing her skull to fracture. Her neck was broken, she had been choked, and a sheet was wrapped around her head. Crystal had also been choked, but the cause of her death was a gunshot wound at close range. Investigators noted that there was very little blood on the ground, suggesting they had been killed elsewhere and moved to this location. It appeared they had been, in the words of one investigator, discarded like rubbish. Their killer had made no effort to hide them. Near the bodies, authorities found what looked like a window shutter with a bloody fingerprint on it and a letter with Brittany's name that provided her home address. However, there were no bags, wallets, or murder weapons at the scene. With few leads to go on, authorities issued a "Be on the lookout" alert for Brittany's silver 2006 Kia Sorento SUV. Detectives from Houston traveled nearly 60 miles to Brittany's house to break the devastating news. As they approached the house, they noticed a missing window shutter that resembled the one found at the crime scene. They spoke with Annie, Brittany's 92-year-old great-grandmother, who expressed her worry about not having heard from Brittany. During their conversation, James, Brittany's father, arrived home. "What's going on?" he asked. "Are you the father?" the detective inquired. "Please, what happened? That's what we're trying to find out. We need your help right now. We want to find out who did this." James appeared visibly shaken when informed about what had happened to his daughter. Meanwhile, Brittany's mother, LaRonda, and her Aunt Ebony learned about the tragedy through social media before the police could reach them. Annie was devastated, saying, "I raised her since she was 2. All she did was go to school and work. She couldn't imagine who would want to hurt her great-granddaughter." James expressed similar shock, saying he kept wondering how this could have happened and who could have done this. When asked about the other victim, he confirmed it was likely Brittany's girlfriend, Crystal. "It is Crystal. I mean, any bad relationships, breakups, anything like that you know of? Anybody that's mad at either one of them?" "I mean, I don't know." Neither James nor Annie had seen Brittany's SUV recently, so the alert for the vehicle remained active. When questioned about the missing window shutter, James mentioned that they had been waiting for a builder named Pepe to finish some work on the house. He provided Pepe's contact information to the detectives. Upon interviewing Pepe, investigators found that he was considerably older than expected, walked with a cane, and clearly wouldn't have been physically capable of committing such a crime. Pepe also stated he hadn't been to the house in quite some time and knew nothing about the window shutters. Next, detectives interviewed Crystal's parents, Mary and Ivan. Ivan was candid about his feelings regarding his daughter's relationship with Brittany and her sexuality. "The only reason I let her come in the house, when she came in the house, you go sit right there where you're sitting." Ivan explained about Brittany visiting their home. "I didn't like that. She just experimented on something." Mary, on the other hand, expressed that she had loved her daughter deeply and had accepted every aspect of her life, constantly trying to strengthen their family bonds. Even mentioned he owned a gun, but adamantly denied any involvement in the murders. The police took his gun for testing as part of the investigation. A few days later, investigators spoke with James again to establish a clearer timeline. James stated he had last seen both women early Thursday morning, and everything had seemed normal. "Last you saw Brittany was that morning." "Yeah." "What about Crystal?" "Same thing. They usually leave early morning, just normal. Nothing was out of the ordinary." When asked about Zanaya being found alone at home, James said he didn't know why they would have left without taking her to school, which was unusual for them. He suggested they might have driven to a store intending to return for her. He added that he had been out all day with his girlfriend Kimberly and wouldn't have known if they had returned home later. Surveillance footage from a convenience store confirmed that Brittany's SUV had been seen leaving around 7:45 a.m. on March 6th, matching James's statement about them leaving around 7:30 a.m. without Zanaya. The same camera captured the vehicle again about 12 hours later, headed in the direction of Galveston, where the bodies were found. Unfortunately, the footage didn't clearly show who was driving the vehicle. Detectives re-interviewed Mary and Ivan to learn more about Zanaya's father and his relationship with Crystal. Mary explained that the relationship between Crystal and her ex, Reginald, had essentially ended shortly after Zanaya's birth. Crystal had full custody, and Reginald was no longer involved in their lives. However, Mary emphasized there was no animosity between them. They simply had no ongoing relationship. When interviewed, Reginald confirmed he had been at home with his mother during the relevant times and voluntarily provided a DNA sample, which helped rule him out as a suspect. Meanwhile, a resident about a mile from Brittany's home found her wallet on a quiet path primarily used by dog walkers. No other evidence was discovered there, but investigators hoped the wallet might contain useful DNA evidence. Back in Galveston, police were checking every available camera, starting with the store near where the bodies were found, but none showed Brittany and Crystal or their vehicle. Detectives realized that if Brittany and Crystal had traveled from Houston to Galveston, they would have used the ferry. Indeed, ferry CCTV footage showed the missing Kia boarding at one point. The footage revealed a tall man exiting the vehicle and speaking with a security guard. The security guard later confirmed this interaction, explaining that he had flagged down the Kia to ask the driver about broken headlights. The guard described the driver as seeming confused and nervous, appearing unfamiliar with the vehicle before driving onto the ferry. Based on the time of death estimates for Brittany and Crystal, investigators believed they would have already been deceased in the back of the car during this ferry crossing. Using the security guard's description, police released a composite sketch of a black male, approximately 6 feet tall, with a slight mustache and slim build, possibly in his 30s. None of the women's family or friends recognized the man in the sketch. However, forensic tests confirmed that the gun used to kill Crystal did not match Ivan's weapon, helping to clear him of suspicion. 6 days after the murders, a community vigil was held to mourn the loss of Brittany and Crystal. Meanwhile, at the police station, lab results came back from tests on the shutter and letter found at the crime scene. A single fingerprint was identified, belonging to James Cosby, Brittany's father. Detective Kitchen, who led the investigation, was stunned by this revelation. Records showed that James had a lengthy criminal history. He was a registered sex offender who had been released from prison just 5 months earlier after serving a 2-year sentence for failing to register as a sex offender. His record also included convictions for sexual assault, assault causing bodily injury, and unlawfully carrying a weapon. While James was attending the vigil, detectives returned to Brittany's house for a more thorough investigation. Annie's caregiver pointed out several unusual changes in the home. Extra rugs that had suddenly appeared in random places, and the normally debris-covered front yard that was now unusually clean. Investigators noticed bricks placed oddly on the ground, which they discovered were covering blood spots. With a warrant in hand, Detective Kitchen and his team entered what was clearly a crime scene. Using luminol, they revealed a horrifying amount of blood throughout James's bedroom. On the walls, floor, some speakers, a chair, a section of carpet, and a pair of his shoes. They seized a hammer and over 300 pieces of evidence, with one investigator noting it was the most evidence he had ever collected at a crime scene. While James was at the vigil pleading for people to help with the case, he was asked to come to the police station as soon as the event concluded. Despite a 6-hour interrogation, he said very little. When detectives finally revealed their findings at the house and the fingerprint evidence, James claimed he couldn't explain how his print was at the scene, couldn't account for the blood in his bedroom, and maintained he knew nothing about what had happened. After hours of questioning, the detectives grew frustrated with what they perceived as deception. "You've been in that room, sleeping in that room with your daughter's blood on the carpet? Jesus, that's horrible. I didn't know it was like that. You can't miss it. I saw it since I walked in there. Brittany had her brains beaten. Explain that. You can't explain it. Brittany had her head smashed in. And James, you did it. That is your own daughter." James was charged with 2 counts of tampering with evidence, though investigators still needed more evidence for murder charges. James's girlfriend, Kimberly, told detectives she had picked him up from a Whataburger restaurant near a strip club hours before Brittany and Crystal were found. Shortly after getting into her car, James had called Houston police to report Kimberly's ex-boyfriend for allegedly trying to run them off the road. This call helped establish James's movements through his phone records. Though the evidence was mounting, James still refused to talk, so police turned to family and friends for additional insights. Family members revealed that James was a devout Muslim who openly disapproved of what he called his daughter's lifestyle. He never supported her sexuality or her relationship with Crystal, often ridiculing and making her uncomfortable. They also described him as jealous of Brittany for having a job and a new SUV while he was still living with his grandmother. He was particularly angry upon learning that Annie planned to leave the house to Brittany. Since returning from prison, James had complained about changes in the house, expressing dissatisfaction with sleeping in the living room and being upset that Brittany wouldn't let him use her car. Lorhonda, Brittany's mother, expressed her anger, saying, "Right now, I hate him. Give him the chair. I want him to suffer." Investigators were building their case methodically. According to court documents, they had recovered several potential weapons from the home, including a hammer. The missing window shutter at the house matched the blood-covered one found at the crime scene. When questioned about how his fingerprint got on the shutter at the scene, James couldn't provide an explanation. While Brittany's SUV remained missing, surveillance video showed it traveling in both directions on the Bolivar ferry on the night of the murders. The investigation's final interview was with 5-year-old Zanaya, who had witnessed critical events that morning. She told detectives that Crystal had put her in the car seat and then went back inside. Zanaya said she heard a loud pop, followed by something that sounded fuzzy and crackly. "When you were sitting in the car, you heard something?" "Yeah, it was like somebody was making somebody..." She described hearing the pop sound very close to the car and crouching down in her seat, hiding from what she called a big, scary man. After some time passed, James came outside, reached into the car, and took the key out. Zanaya then went inside with him. When she asked him, "Do you know where my mommy is?" he shrugged and said, "Maybe in one of those rooms." When she asked if she could check his room, he snapped at her and said no in what she described as a mean and scary voice. James then left the house, leaving Zanaya alone. "Did you ever see blood in his room? Tell me where you saw the blood. There was blood splatter. Tell me where the blood splatter was in his room." "On his bed." "Did you see it anywhere else?" "On his floor." "You heard a gunshot. Tell me how you know it was a gunshot." "Because he took them outside." "Did somebody tell you that?" Or did you see that? I see that. Based on all the evidence, investigators theorized that James and Brittany had gotten into an argument that morning. James had punched his daughter in the face, knocking her to the floor, then struck her in the head multiple times with an object. As Brittany lay dying, James choked her. Crystal had returned to the house after putting Zanaya in the car seat and, seeing what happened, tried to escape to reach her daughter. She made it outside but was shot near the window, explaining the blood on the shutter and door. Investigators believed James had left Zanaya in the house with the bodies while he spent the day with Kimberly. He returned in the evening, loaded the bodies into Brittany's Kia, and drove to Port Bolivar. After dumping the bodies, he drove to the Ritz Strip Club in Houston, left the car in the parking lot, walked to a nearby Whataburger, and called Kimberly to pick him up. James Larry Cosby Jr. was charged with 2 counts of capital murder. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. About a month later, authorities finally located Brittany's missing SUV. The owner of the strip club had it towed to an impound lot after it had occupied a parking space for weeks. When it was processed, it triggered the Be on the Lookout alert. The back of the vehicle was covered in blood, and a bullet fragment with Crystal's DNA was found inside. Funeral services were held for Brittany and Crystal, with family members and friends gathering to say goodbye. Crystal's father, Ivan, despite his past disapproval of her relationship, spoke at his daughter's funeral and expressed no animosity toward Brittany's family, saying he prayed for them. In 2016, James Cosby's trial began. His defense lawyers argued that prosecutors had no murder weapon, and despite what James had told others about his feelings toward his daughter, no clear motive. The prosecution countered that this wasn't necessary to prove their case, as phone records tracked James to where the bodies were found, and the overwhelming evidence inside the house was compelling. Zanaya's testimony had filled in the remaining gaps. The prosecutor described James as someone consumed by bitterness, anger, hatred, and jealousy, stating that a person that can murder their child and their girlfriend and then act like nothing happened is truly an evil person that needs to be locked up forever. In August 2016, James Cosby was found guilty of capital murder and automatically sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His subsequent appeal was denied. Today, Zanaya is being raised by Crystal's parents, Ivan and Mary. Ivan has said he struggles with his feelings and past conversations every day, adding, "It's been really tough, but on the same token, it's made me much stronger because I have a responsibility now, and that's to raise my grandbaby. There's one verse in the Bible that helped me forgive this man, and it says, 'Absent from the body, present with the Lord.' And I know that my daughter and Brittany are present with God. I carry a lot of guilt with me. The things I should have said to my daughter, I didn't." A few years after the tragedy, when asked how much she missed her mother, Zanaya replied, "Maybe the last number of all of the numbers. That's the highest number." Detective Danny Kitchen, who led the investigation and worked tirelessly to bring justice for the young couple, proudly became Zanaya's godfather and continues to support her as she grows up. The story of Brittany Cosby and Crystal Jackson began as one of love and hope for a future together, but ended as a painful reminder that discrimination and judgment can exist even within our closest circles. Their memory lives on in those who loved them, and in the new family bonds formed in the aftermath of this tragedy. On a warm September evening in 2009, the city of Austin, Texas was winding down from a busy Labor Day weekend. The summer heat had lingered well into the evening, making it perfect for swimming pools and barbecues. 27-year-old Jessica Kauler had spent her holiday exactly that way, enjoying time with her cousin and best friend Melanie, along with a few other friends. Jessica was the kind of person who always had multiple responsibilities balanced at once. After graduating from Texas State University, she maintained 2 jobs while working toward her master's degree. During the day, she would substitute teach at local elementary schools, hoping to secure a permanent teaching position someday. In the evenings and on weekends, she worked at a grocery store, saving money to pay off her student loans and fund her graduate studies. Despite the pressures of her busy schedule, Jessica maintained an optimistic outlook on life. She once wrote in a journal, "Someday, everything will make perfect sense. Laugh at the confusion, smile through the tears, and keep reminding yourself that everything happens for a reason." Her family and friends knew her as conscientious, focused, and always pleasant to be around. That Labor Day had been particularly enjoyable. Jessica and her friends had spent hours swimming and enjoying a barbecue. As evening approached, the group went out to a restaurant and later to a bar to play pool. Jessica was careful not to drink much since she was driving everyone home and had work the next morning. At around 1:30 a.m., Jessica dropped off Melanie, who was the last person in the car. Melanie asked if Jessica wanted to stay over for the night, but Jessica declined. She wanted to wake up refreshed for her shift the following day, and she needed to stop at Walmart to get food for her dogs. With a warm hug goodbye, Jessica left Melanie's place and headed toward the 24-hour Walmart nearby. Morning came, and phones began to ring. One of Jessica's colleagues called Melanie with concerning news. Jessica hadn't shown up for work. This was completely out of character for her. Jessica was never one to call in sick, let alone miss work without notification. Melanie immediately felt something was wrong. After making several calls to mutual friends with no success in locating Jessica, Melanie's concern deepened. Jessica shared an apartment with Melanie's brother John, who worked as a police officer. John had started his shift at 5:30 a.m. and hadn't seen Jessica, but he had assumed they simply missed each other as she slept. When John returned home to check, he was greeted by Jessica's distressed dog. It appeared that Jessica hadn't been home at all since the previous day. Taking immediate action, John reported her missing to his colleagues and requested they track her phone. The phone signal led them to an intersection near Highway 183 and Walton Way in Cedar Park. It wasn't a remote location, quite the opposite. The area was surrounded by businesses, and at that time of day was busy with traffic and pedestrians. Melanie and her boyfriend Sergey hurried to the location and quickly spotted Jessica's white Kia parked neatly outside a Little Caesars pizza restaurant. As they approached the car, they noticed an unpleasant odor emanating from inside, even though the windows were closed. The temperature outside had reached 90 degrees, intensifying the smell. Through the window, they could see Jessica slumped in the driver's seat, which was positioned much farther back than usual. She wasn't moving. When they opened the unlocked car door, the smell became overwhelming. Melanie gently touched Jessica's head, trying to wake her, but there was no response. Jessica's skin was reddened from sunburn, her body marked with various injuries, and her hair damp with sweat. Sergey immediately called 911. When authorities arrived and examined Jessica, they confirmed what Melanie and Sergey had feared. Jessica Kauler had passed away. The medical examination revealed a ligature mark across her neck and small hemorrhages around her eyes, face, and neck. Her body showed numerous bruises and scratches. Evidence indicated she had been sexually assaulted and strangled twice, once with some type of cloth, possibly the tie from her dress, and again by someone's hands. The marks on her neck suggested she had desperately tried to fight off her attacker, with scratches from her own fingernails. Jessica's wallet, cards, and car keys were missing, though her phone remained and was collected as evidence. Because the car was found in a busy commercial area, investigators began by speaking with employees of nearby businesses. A restaurant worker reported seeing Jessica alive earlier that morning. She described Jessica crawling around inside her car, apparently trying to put on her bathing suit. Later, the same employee observed Jessica sitting outside her car playing with her hair. The final time she saw her, Jessica was back in the car, talking to herself and making unusual hand gestures. Other witnesses described Jessica as appearing confused and lethargic. The next reported sighting was when she was found deceased. Melanie assured police that Jessica had been completely sober when they parted ways, and that Jessica didn't use drugs. The toxicology report confirmed this, showing no traces of drugs, alcohol, or medication in her system. This made Jessica's reported behavior even more puzzling to investigators. In the back of Jessica's car was a large bag of dog food, consistent with her stated intention to stop at Walmart. Investigators reviewed the security footage from the 24-hour Walmart across the street, which showed Jessica arriving at 1:45 a.m. She entered the store alone, wearing her white dress, a red baseball cap, and carrying her bag. Inside the store, Jessica moved normally, showing no signs of the erratic behavior described by witnesses later. She went directly to the pet supplies section, selected dog food, and proceeded to check out before leaving the store. The Walmart security footage revealed something concerning. As Jessica exited the store, a tall man in a brown shirt and baseball cap appeared to follow her. This man had entered the Walmart shortly before Jessica, parking his small red truck at a distance from her car. After using the bathroom inside, he emerged just behind Jessica, who was carrying her bag of dog food over her shoulder. As Jessica returned to her car, the man followed approximately 20 seconds behind her, increasing his pace. Unfortunately, Jessica's car was parked behind a large tree that blocked the security camera's view. Another camera with a poor quality image showed only that the man had approached her car. He didn't reappear on camera afterward, and his truck remained in its parking spot for about 2 minutes after both Jessica and the man had reached her car. Then the truck pulled out and left the area. The cameras also captured Jessica's car being parked outside the Little Caesars restaurant. The footage showed someone crossing the road from her car toward the Walmart parking lot. This person was identified as the same man seen earlier, who then returned to his truck and drove away quickly. At 5:05 a.m., approximately 20 minutes after Jessica's car parked at the Little Caesars, her bank card was used at an Exxon gas station by the same man seen on the Walmart footage. Jessica's car remained stationary from 2:50 a.m. until she was discovered. However, witnesses had seen her alive during those hours, displaying unusual behavior. Investigators released portions of the security footage and issued an alert for the red pickup truck. While they continued their investigation, Jessica's funeral was held. It was during the service that her family first noticed the marks around her neck, learning that she had been strangled. This discovery made an already painful day even more devastating for them. To the investigators' relief, they received a call about the red truck from a woman named Leslie. She believed the vehicle belonged to 37-year-old Crispin Harmel, who was her fiancé's best friend. Leslie explained that Crispin was supposed to visit their apartment to repay some money he owed them, but he never appeared. This was unusual, and she couldn't shake her feeling of unease. Though Crispin was like family to her, Leslie felt compelled to contact the authorities because a young woman had lost her life. Police discovered that Crispin had been stopped for an expired registration just 3 weeks earlier. The officer's body cameras had recorded him driving the same truck and wearing the same baseball cap seen in the Walmart footage. 5 days after Jessica was found, police visited Crispin's residence for an interview. They immediately noticed that the appearance of his truck had been altered. Certain parts that had been silver were now painted black. Crispin didn't seem surprised by their visit and acknowledged knowing Jessica. He claimed they had arranged to meet through a website called lonelyhousewifehookups.com, communicating via Messenger and agreeing to meet at Walmart between 12:30 and 1 a.m. on the morning she died. According to Crispin, he and Jessica drove away in her car and had consensual relations near a park. He stated that he had been in her car and might have been one of the last people to see her alive, but this didn't mean he was responsible for her death. However, investigators already knew that the security footage contradicted his story. The timing of their arrivals at Walmart didn't match his account, and Jessica's behavior suggested she was there solely to purchase dog food, not to meet anyone. Crispin further claimed that Jessica drove him back to Walmart, where they chatted briefly in her car. He told her about his financial difficulties, mentioning he was struggling to pay for gas. According to him, she offered her debit card and wrote the PIN number on his hand. When he learned of Jessica's death the following day, he panicked, discarded her debit card, and altered his truck's appearance to avoid suspicion. Despite Crispin's confident demeanor, investigators found his story implausible. Melanie and Jessica's other friends confirmed that Jessica had never mentioned plans to meet anyone that night. Moreover, Jessica was known to be cautious and would have informed someone if she were meeting a stranger late at night. A thorough examination of both Jessica's and Crispin's computers and phones revealed no conversations between them, nor had Jessica ever visited the website he mentioned. Investigators did discover that shortly after Jessica was found deceased, Crispin had searched for her name online and viewed images and articles about her. Police believed that Crispin had followed Jessica outside Walmart, forced himself into her car, made her drive to a park where he assaulted and strangled her, then drove her car back to the parking lot, leaving her unconscious and taking her card. When detectives mentioned the security footage, Crispin immediately requested a lawyer and refused to speak further. While investigators were confident they had identified Jessica's attacker, they still couldn't explain why she had been seen alive and behaving strangely hours after Crispin had left the scene. They couldn't charge him with murder at that point, but they did have sufficient evidence to charge him with tampering with evidence. In May 2010, after pleading guilty to that charge, he was sentenced to 10 years. The murder investigation remained open, with authorities reviewing the evidence repeatedly. Eventually, they discovered a crucial piece of information that began to provide answers. Detectives found an article by a professor from Indiana University School of Medicine about delayed death due to strangulation. The article explained that death from strangulation isn't always immediate and can occur hours after the initial assault. This phenomenon, known as delayed death due to strangulation, offered an explanation for Jessica's unusual behavior. Dr. Bill Smart, a forensic medicine expert, explained that strangulation first causes unconsciousness due to the brain not receiving enough oxygenated blood. This may be followed by seizures, and after approximately 15 seconds, brain cells begin to die. The first physical responses include loss of bladder control, followed by loss of rectal sphincter control. The brain stem, which controls breathing and heartbeat, is the last part of the brain to die, while areas controlling personality and memory are affected earlier. It became evident that Crispin had strangled Jessica twice, believing he had killed her when she lost consciousness. The combination of brain damage from strangulation and heat stroke from exposure to the hot sun for an extended period created a fatal situation for Jessica. With this scientific understanding and clear evidence of Crispin's intent to cause harm, he was indicted for capital murder in May 2013. At trial, Dr. Bill Smart testified, affirming the medical examiner's conclusion that Jessica died as a result of strangulation. He explained, "In this case, I think we have two explanations as to why Jessica's behavior was abnormal. One, brain damage from strangulation, and number two, heat." The defense noted the absence of DNA evidence linking Crispin to Jessica, but experts explained that the extreme heat and humidity could have degraded any DNA evidence rapidly. The prosecution remained confident, given the substantial video evidence implicating Crispin. Unfortunately, the initial trial ended in a mistrial after prosecutors were accused of withholding evidence. In the spring of 2018, nearly a decade after Jessica's death, Crispin's second trial began. The jury watched video of his police interrogation, in which investigators pointed out numerous inconsistencies in his story. For instance, Jessica's car seat was pushed all the way back, making it impossible for her to reach the pedals, contradicting Crispin's claim that she had driven them both. Additionally, Jessica's car keys were never found, and surveillance footage never showed her car's lights turn on or the vehicle move after being parked. This time, the jury found Crispin Harmel guilty of capital murder. As prosecutors did not seek the death penalty, he was automatically sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In 2020, he appealed his conviction, but the appeal was denied, and he remains incarcerated with the same sentence. Jessica had enjoyed a wonderful evening with friends before stopping at Walmart that September morning. She was simply planning to go home, feed her dogs, get some rest, and go to work the next day. Her master's degree was within reach, and she had much to look forward to in life. Jessica's cousin John expressed that even knowing her attacker had been caught and imprisoned didn't bring the relief he had hoped for. It doesn't change anything. He still gets to live, and Jessica doesn't. He reflected quietly. Her father shared his sense of loss for what might have been. He took away my opportunity to walk her down the aisle. She would have been a great mother. I know it. I miss her a lot. Melanie noted that, as with all loss, some days are easier than others. However, even positive memories are often overshadowed by what she witnessed in that parking lot. No day will ever feel entirely complete. Something will always be missing. On warm September evenings in Austin, when the summer heat lingers into the night, those who knew and loved Jessica Kaler remember a young woman whose life was filled with promise, whose glass was always half full, and whose gentle presence is forever missed. In the summer of 2011, the small city of Stockton, California, welcomed a new resident. 23-year-old Daylene Carlson had recently moved from her hometown in Idaho to pursue new opportunities and further her education. Daylene was the kind of person who enjoyed the outdoors, snowboarding in winter, fishing in summer, and taking long walks with her beloved dog, Maddie. She had a bright smile and an adventurous spirit that drew people to her. After years of saving money from various restaurant jobs, Daylene had enrolled at San Joaquin Delta College to major in child development. She moved in with her Aunt Maggie and cousin Cecily, who helped introduce her to Stockton and show her around town. Daylene was busy making new friends and getting acquainted with her new surroundings, building the foundation for what she hoped would be a promising future. On August 6, 2011, a warm summer evening, Deline prepared to go out by herself for the first time since moving to Stockton. Her cousin Cecily, who usually accompanied her, was feeling unwell with a fever. Deline, ever confident and social, decided she would still venture out to places she had already become familiar with, including Finnegan's Bar and Grill, which had quickly become one of her favorite spots. Before leaving the house that evening, Deline took time to choose her outfit carefully. She wore a black and white vest top with ripped blue denim jeans, and her dark brown hair hung loose around her shoulders. She even asked Cecily to take a picture of her so she could see how her outfit looked. As she was heading out the door, her Aunt Maggie called out to her, reminding her to be home by 3 a.m. at the latest. Deline agreed and set off into the evening. The night progressed, and 3 a.m. came and went with no sign of Deline. By 3:30 a.m., Maggie was awake and texting her niece to check if everything was all right, hoping perhaps that she had simply decided to stay at a friend's house. As the hours passed without any response, Maggie's concern grew. She tried to get some rest, but found herself waking frequently, listening for the sound of the front door opening, which never came. As morning arrived, Maggie's worry intensified. If Deline had stayed with a friend, surely she would have found a way to charge her phone and make contact. Maggie called around to her daughter and niece's friends before finally deciding to call 911 to report Deline as missing. Although it was technically too early to file an official missing persons report, the police logged the information. Meanwhile, family and friends began searching the streets for any sign of the young woman. The day passed into night and back to morning, with no trace of Deline. It had been just a couple of months since she had moved to Stockton, and now the 23-year-old had vanished. When the police officially began their investigation into Deline's disappearance, they started with what they knew of her plans for the evening. Armed with the photo Cecily had taken of Deline before she left the house, officers spoke to the staff at Finnegan's Bar and Grill, where she had intended to go. One of the managers at Finnegan's remembered seeing Deline that night. She had been there several times before, and according to him, she had spent most of the evening standing outside the bar. Nothing had seemed unusual or out of the ordinary to him. Deline had arrived at the bar with a friend who had given her a ride, and once there she had encountered her on-again, off-again boyfriend, 25-year-old Jacob Evangelisti. When interviewed by police, Jacob was forthcoming about their relationship. "I purposely got there before she did. She came up to me to talk to me," he told them. He admitted that he and Deline had not been on the best terms recently. Just 4 days earlier, they had gotten into a significant argument during which Jacob, who had been drinking, grabbed Deline's arm as she tried to get away from him. Jacob also mentioned hearing that Deline had been talking to a mutual friend named James Cousins, which had further strained their relationship. According to Jacob, he and Deline kept their distance from each other for most of the night, until she eventually broke up with him. Jacob was upset and wanted to work things out, but Deline seemed to have made up her mind. Jacob maintained that Deline had left the bar before him, though he wasn't sure if she had left with anyone. His account aligned with what employees at the bar had told police. Security camera footage from the building showed Deline outside for a while, smoking, before moving back inside around 12:50 a.m. The footage showed her interacting with several people throughout the evening. At one point, the camera captured a man putting his arm around Deline momentarily before walking behind her in the corridor. This man was later identified as 25-year-old Jason Gilly, another mutual friend who lived with James Cousins. Later, the footage showed Deline going back outside, where she spoke with Jacob. Their conversation appeared animated, with Deline gesturing expressively with her arms, which matched Jacob's description of their heated conversation that night. As the police investigation continued, officers learned from Jacob that he had received text messages from Delane after she left the bar. She had told him she was going to a party at a friend's house, and she had called him approximately 12 times after leaving Finnegan's. During one of these brief calls, Jacob said he heard a man's voice in the background. In one of the text messages, Delane mentioned she was drinking at Jason Gilley's house. Early in the morning, Delane had texted Jacob asking if she could come to his house later, and he had agreed. However, hours passed without any further communication from her. Jacob eventually fell asleep and woke up to find no additional messages on his phone. The next step for police was to speak with Jason Gilley and James Cousins. James was straightforward in his responses, stating that while he and Delane had been chatting, they were not in an official relationship. He was also able to quickly establish that he had been out of Stockton on a trip at the time of Delane's disappearance, which was confirmed by multiple people. Jason Gilley initially told police that he couldn't help with their investigation. He claimed that he and Delane had parted ways at the bar. According to Jason, he had offered her a ride home but had to leave without her around 1 a.m. because his grandmother had texted him that his young son was sick. This directly conflicted with Jacob's statement that Delane had told him she was drinking at Jason's house. Jason's grandmother told police that Jason had arrived home at approximately 1:30 a.m. Jason then tried to redirect the detective's attention to Jacob, mentioning the fights that he and Delane had experienced. Jason claimed to have witnessed one particularly intense argument between them. Meanwhile, Delane's family and friends were working tirelessly to find her. They managed to raise $1,000 to add to the Crime Stoppers' existing $1,000 reward for information. A local semi-professional football team offered to host a game and raffle to raise additional funds, and everyone was distributing flyers and searching, though the outlook was becoming increasingly concerning. After exhausting all leads from Finnegan's Bar and Grill, investigators expanded their search, going from business to business in the area and requesting any available camera footage. Their persistence paid off when they discovered footage from a 24-hour Food 4 Less store. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on the night Delane disappeared, the store's security camera had captured footage of Delane and a man purchasing alcohol together. The man in the footage was Jason Gilley, the same person who had told police he had left Delane at the bar and hadn't seen her since. Police brought Jason in for questioning a second time, now that they had evidence he had not been truthful in his initial statement. When investigators showed Jason the footage from Food 4 Less, he changed his story. He suddenly remembered that he had gone to buy Jägermeister with Delane at the store, but claimed he had dropped her back off at Finnegan's before heading home. The detectives could sense there was more to Jason's story, and as they pressed him further, he became emotional. Eventually, Jason admitted that he and Delane had gone to his house where they had consensual sexual relations. According to this new version of events, Delane became angry afterward and seemed to regret their encounter, so she decided to walk home. Jason said he followed her in his car, picked her up, and drove her 40 miles south, dropping her off at a random location at her request before getting gas. He expressed feeling remorseful about his decision and admitted that as days passed, he grew increasingly worried, knowing he was likely the last person to have seen Delane. He explained that he had lied to protect himself. At this point in the investigation, police strongly suspected that Delane was no longer alive, and they directly asked Jason where her body was. Just as it seemed they might be making progress, Jason requested a lawyer, and the questioning ended. Investigators arrested Jason Gilley for kidnapping and holding Delane against her will. However, they did not have sufficient evidence for a murder charge at that time. Jason continued to deny any wrongdoing, and his family insisted on his innocence, claiming that Deline had left their house alive and well on Sunday morning. Despite the arrest, Jason was released from custody when prosecutors determined there wasn't enough evidence to pursue the kidnapping charges against him. The prosecutor explained that regardless of how strong their intuition might be, they needed concrete evidence to proceed with the case. After Jason's release, police continued their search for Deline and any evidence related to her disappearance. They reviewed additional security footage and found a recording from a 7-Eleven store that showed Jason purchasing gas at around 11 a.m. the morning after Deline was last seen. In the footage, Jason appeared to be wiping his arms and shirt, and closer examination revealed that he was covered in dirt. Investigators then focused their attention on searching new areas, including sections of the Calaveras River, which was known to be used as a dumping ground and was just a few blocks from Jason's house. The area was particularly muddy and overgrown, making the search challenging. During their search of the river, authorities found a flip-flop that may have belonged to Deline. 2 months after Deline's disappearance, a farm worker made a tragic discovery in a cornfield. The worker found human remains that were later identified as belonging to Dalen Carlson. Her body was severely decomposed, essentially reduced to a skeleton. She had been shot 5 times from behind, with 1 bullet to the back of her head and 2 to her back. The positioning of her remains suggested she had been clutching her head as she fell, in what appeared to be an execution-style killing, likely while on her knees and facing away from the shooter. A black bra was found near her body, and her jeans were discovered 6 miles away a few days later. Dental records confirmed the identity of the remains as Deline Carlson, bringing a sense of closure to her family, though under the most heartbreaking circumstances. Following the identification of Deline's remains, investigators focused on building their case against Jason Gilley. They noted significant inconsistencies in his various statements, and his alibi, which had been supported by his grandmother, was now being dismantled. His grandmother eventually admitted to lying to the police to protect him. Authorities received information from someone close to Jason, who revealed that he owned a gun. Upon examination, the casings found at the crime scene matched this weapon. Cell phone tower data placed Jason and Deline together in the area where her body was discovered, and authorities believed Jason had been using Deline's phone to send messages to others after she was deceased. Deline's aunt expressed her bewilderment at the tragedy, saying, "I can't conceive why someone would do it to somebody who just wanted to be a friend. She wanted people to like her. She loved people. She was a little social magnet. I honestly think he probably advanced himself, and she probably refused it." Based on the evidence they had gathered, prosecutors theorized that Jason had convinced Deline to go to his house after stopping for alcohol, possibly offering to drive her home afterward. However, once they arrived at his residence, the situation took a dark turn. They believed he sexually assaulted her, then forced her into his car at gunpoint and drove her to the cornfield where he shot her multiple times. Text message records revealed that in the 3 days leading up to Deline's disappearance, Jason had sent her approximately 200 messages. These messages had become increasingly demanding and sexual in nature, including persistent requests for her underwear and nude photographs. Deline had either attempted to laugh off these messages, ignore them, or dismiss them outright. Authorities suggested that Jason had developed an unhealthy fixation on Deline, and the only plausible motive for wanting her dead would be to prevent her from reporting a sexual assault. With a significant amount of evidence now accumulated, including more than 1,000 pages of documentation, not including phone records, Jason Gilley was charged with the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Delene Carlson. After various delays, Jason Gilley's trial began more than 2 years after Delene's disappearance. Throughout the legal proceedings, Jason maintained his innocence and continued to change his account of what had transpired on the night Delene vanished. His final version of events was as follows. He left Finnegan's bar with Delene. They purchased alcohol at the store, and he took her back to his house where they engaged in sexual activity. According to Jason, Delene then became angry and demanded to be taken home. During the car ride, he claimed Delene called him a piece of garbage and attempted to jump out of the moving vehicle, but he had locked the doors. He stated that he dropped her off in Modesto, got back on the freeway, and returned home. Jason's former best friend, Robert Cousin, who had initially defended him, testified against him at the trial. Robert stated that he had completely cut Jason out of his life after learning more about the case. He explained that when media attention on Jason was intense, he had allowed Jason to stay at his house to escape the scrutiny. Robert, like many others, had defended Jason because of how adamantly he denied any involvement in Delene's disappearance. During the trial, I want to watch this step by step. I want to see this man go down for what he did to that girl, Robert told reporters outside the courthouse. I got a 5-year-old daughter at home, so I don't feel any sympathy for him or his family. When the jury began their deliberations, they were presented with all the evidence gathered by investigators, including the ballistic evidence linking Jason's gun to the crime scene, cell phone data placing him in the area where Delene's body was found, and the numerous inconsistencies in his statements to police. After careful consideration, the jury found Jason Gilley guilty of kidnapping and murder. The charge of rape ended in a mistrial. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars for his crimes against Delene Carlson. Delene Carlson had packed up her life to make a significant move from Idaho to California. She had dreams and aspirations and had carefully planned everything to ensure she could fulfill them. What should have been a simple night out with friends instead became her last. Her family was left to grapple with the profound loss of a young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. In the aftermath of the trial, Delene's Aunt Maggie reflected on their journey of grief and healing. It's not that you ever get over it, she shared. What helps with healing is remembering the good times, remembering everything that was good when she was alive. Because what we did get was great. Delene is remembered for her adventurous spirit, her love of the outdoors, and her warm, sociable nature. She was someone who embraced life and sought to build meaningful connections with those around her. Though her time in Stockton was tragically cut short, the impact she had on the lives of her family and friends continues to be felt. The case of Delene Carlson serves as a somber reminder of how quickly circumstances can change and how important it is to cherish the time we have with our loved ones. While justice was ultimately served, nothing can bring back the bright, promising young woman who moved to Stockton with hopes and dreams for her future.